class. Today's class we're going to start talking about the laws of Psuki Zimra. We ended last class going over some of these laws, and the thing that we covered was a lot of the breaks that were in there. We didn't go into that in some detail, so I'm going to review that over here in terms of making interruptions in the middle of Psuki Zimra. So we'll go over some of the general ideas, and then move on to Siman 52 Nun Beis. So just to recap from last week we were talking about Baruch Shamar until Yishtabach, and you should say Baruch Shamar before you recite Psuki Zimra. Psuki Zimra is actually the verses themselves. Baruch Shamar is not part of it. Baruch Shamar, as we learned last time, was a praise that was established by Anshe Knesset Hagadola based on a small piece of paper or parchment that fell from the sky, and they saw that it had 87 words on it, and be based on the fact that it seemed to be appropriate to go ahead and talk about how the verses themselves, the paragraph itself talks about using verses of praise to praise Hashem. Therefore, they put it at the beginning of Psuki Zimra. So the custom is to hold it sits in front of you when you do that. So let's talk about the interruptions. So number one, instead of going through the halachas again straight through, we're just going to talk about interruptions to kind of wrap up what we learned last time. So you should avoid interruptions in Psuki Zimra because it's one long bracha. And so even though you aren't obligated to interrupt for other types of things, one could go ahead and say Amen. You can also say Yehei Shmei Rabba, and that would be permissible. You shouldn't interrupt with speech of any kind. The Mishna Berurah brings down here in this one, in number 7, one should say Baruch Hashem, and then that's the best way to go ahead and do it. When you greet people walk by, if you're in between the different sections of verses, then the laws are kind of like the same in Shema. So you can respond to someone's greeting if a person is someone who has greeted you, okay, but not in the middle of the verses themselves. You would have to kind of nod. So that would be the appropriate thing to do, not to go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're also not supposed to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo if you were doing Psuki Zimra or listening to the repetition of Shemona Esrei. And you are not allowed, you should not also, if people are in the middle of, if you're in shul and you hear people in the middle of slichos, you shouldn't respond to the Yud Gimel Minos, the 13 attributes that are being responded to that. And if you happen to hear Modim Dirabanan, right, you hear Modim Anachlach, you may say those 3 words, but other than that, you can't do that. Some people allow you to say the Shema when you hear the congregation recite the Shema. That's about it. Now, what about announcing pages? So this is something that's not in the Mishna Berurah. So some people feel that it is okay to announce the pages, but the custom is to not do that. The custom is to have a signboard and you just simply change the numbers that way, but not to actually announce it. Even though announcing it would be considered tzarech hatefillah, we try to avoid doing that since it's not absolutely necessary. One thing you could interrupt to do is, if you went to the bathroom, you can recite Asher Yatzar. You could also, if you started Psuki Zimra before daybreak, you can put on your talis and fell in the middle of Psuki Zimra. So that is some of the interesting rules in there. You also shouldn't be called up for an aliyah during Psuki Zimra unless you're a Kohen or a Levi. So those are some interesting laws about that, and that's basically 51 in a nutshell. And that's the main thing to glean from it, is not to interrupt any speeches of any kind. So the Mishna Berurah brings down in the places where we could make a break, but most of those are marked off specifically in the Siddur. It says you can take there are breaks marked off in the article Siddur, for example. But we don't as a rule interrupt Psuki Zimra at all. So that is basically 51 in a nutshell. We're going to move on to 52 now and cover that. Okay? So again, we're reciting everything very slowly, pleasantly, and paying attention to the words, what they mean, just like we're learning in 51. Okay, now, let's say you were delayed in coming to shul in the morning to recite Pesukei de Zimra. What do you do? That's what we're going to learn about in 52, Nun base. Okay, so that's the rules over here. If you come to shul and you find that the congregation, the tzibur, is at the end of Pesukei de Zimra, and you can say the first paragraph of Baruch Shamar, and then you're going to skip to Ashrei, which starts with the words Tehillah Davi, but you start with the words Ashrei, and you can finish that paragraph. Then you skip to the paragraph that starts with Halu Es Hashem Min Shemaim, which is 2 sections later. You finish that paragraph, and then you skip to Halu Kel B'Kodsho until that one finishes. So you say those 3. Okay, and if you have a little extra time, the Ramah adds, you can add the paragraph of Hodu immediately after Baruch Shamar, and you can skip the first paragraph right before Ashrei after that paragraph, and which is in between that is Mizul Soda, the paragraph that you recite, the Kapitel Tehillim you recite for Thanksgiving offerings. That is in between the first set of paragraphs, the first set of Pesukim, and the second set. So we're giving a little more precedence to certain things. But after you've gone ahead and said Ashrei, you can jump right to Yishtabach, jump into the first bracha, Yotzer Or Bari Choshech, Kriyas Shema, the rest of the brachos, and make sure you catch up in time to say the Shemona Esrei with the congregation. That's optimally if you got there late. Now, if that doesn't work, okay, if you can't even get all that in, then you should just cut out. Then you should only say Ashrei. You should say Baruch Shamar, Ashrei, and which is the first one of those Tehillim, and then the last one. Okay, and then go to that one. And if there's even less time than that, the Ramah adds, you should only say Baruch Shamar, Ashrei, and Yishtabach. That's it. That's Pesukei de Zimra. But that's assuming they're still in Pesukei de Zimra. If you get to shul and you find that you've already missed Baruch Hu, then you should go ahead and just go right into the blessings of Kriya Shema and start reciting it with them to make sure that you recite Shemona Esrei with the congregation. And then afterwards you can go back and recite Pesukei de Zimra, but you don't say Baruch Shamar and you don't recite Yishtabach. Then the Ramah adds, nonetheless, you should recite all of the blessings that are required for the morning blessings. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah brings down, he says, you should come to shul early. What do we learn from this halacha? Come to shul early. Don't wait until this point. But sometimes, things happen. Okay, so that's the best thing, is to not do that. And actually, interesting enough, there's a story he brings here in the Mishnah Berurah that the Beis Yosef himself, Rabbi Yosef Karo, he was visited regularly by an angel called the Magid, and this Magid used to warn him not to come to shul late. You should actually get there a little bit early, in order that you should follow the proper order of the davening, and not to skip around. And why is that? Because someone who basically comes in and follows the proper order, they receive a proper channel of divine energy from following the proper order. Kind of like one builds a Lego set. You follow the directions, it works really nicely. But if you skip around and jump around, it doesn't work so well. And many people have this custom of getting there early so they can follow the entire order slowly and correctly. Now, some people who do come late to shul, but they're just, if they come, then they go a little quickly. All right, so they come. So there's a Shuvah he quotes over here that this whole statement of you should get there early enough to follow the proper order of the Seder is only when you are praying by yourself and not with the community. But if you come to shul late and you find that at shul they are davening Shemona Esrei, So everyone agrees that you should not follow the order, and you should skip right to Shemona Esrei, because the most important thing is to recite Shemona Esrei with the community themselves, with the tzibur. So it's called Tefillah b'tzibur, is what we're referring to over here, and this is echoed by a number of other people. And this is even for somebody who doesn't regularly come to shul in the morning or even in the afternoon, the evening. Nonetheless, if they do happen to come to shul, they should get there and stick with the pattern and the pace of the tzibur, and not just do your own thing in the middle of the davening. Okay, so you should try to get tefillah b'tzibur. That is the most meritorious thing to do. So if you have time to kind of just say Baruch Shamar Ashrei and Yishtabach, okay, that's good. Okay, so now when we're talking about coming a little bit late, it means that you already put on your talis and your tefillin, and that's when you realize they finished Psukei Zimra. But you should not have those on, because you need to have those on before you daven Shema. Okay, and if a person is coming so late and you feel that they won't even have time to recite the early morning blessings like Netilas Yadayim and Elokai Neshama and Berurah Satara, you should leave those till the end of davening. But some people don't like that. So what they say is that you should try to get those in beforehand if you can. And if not, you should try to find somebody else who has woken up later to recite it for you. And certainly for Netilas Yadayim, you can't recite that after davening is already completed. Let's see. What else we have over here? Let's skip over here. Okay, so let's say it's Shabbos. Now on Shabbos, you should skip some of the additional Tehillim that are added on Shabbos, and skip straight. So there's about 5 kapitlach that are added in before the paragraph of Yehi Chavod Hashem Le'olam, which is what we say during the rest of the week. And then you should skip those first, and if you're running late, skip those first and go right to the sections you would normally say during the week, because we're giving preference to the ones that show up more often and more frequently to those that only show up once a week. And if you have time, you can go back and add some of those other ones. Okay, and so on Shabbos, you should also make sure you say Nishmas Kol Chai. So you should leave yourself some time to recite that. That's really, really important to not skip that. And you should skip other things inside of Psukei Zimra and make sure you say Nishmas Kol Chai, which is not like the pattern during the week for the rest of Psukei Zimra. Okay, and the reason why everyone's so strict about this is because of how old the enactment was for Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach. And so therefore, they felt that it was important to recite it. However, it doesn't mean that one should skip reciting Tefillah b'tzibur as a result of these things, but that's why it's been given so much precedence. But you cannot recite it afterwards. Now, if you find that the chazan or the shliach tzibur is kind of dragging out the davening, they're going a little slow or they're singing a lot, so if you have time to kind of sneak it in, that would be okay as well. The main point is to catch up to the tzibur, to the community, when they're saying Shemona Esrei. So that's another plot twist to your coming late to shul in the morning, is to say, they have the slow guy davening today. I can squeeze in a little bit of Psukei Zimra. So the advice is if you can squeeze it in, it's really a very important part. You should try to squeeze it in. Okay. Now, if it's impossible for you to start anywhere but with the blessings of Shema in order to catch up to the congregation by the time they get to Shemona Esrei, then that's what you should do. And you shouldn't start Psukei Zimra at all, because you don't want to get stuck in the middle of that and then try to catch up later, because you won't have done the blessing of Psukei Zimra correctly. So it's a judgment call, and you should not look at it like you can skip one thing or another. You also can't skip the Kriya Shema blessing, because you want to make sure that you say all of Kriya Shema, so that way you have what's known as Smicha Skula Tefillah, which we talked about before, Smicha Segula Tefillah, and we'll talk about more in coming chapters, is you want to make sure that you put the blessings of the Shema that talk about the exodus from Egypt right next to the prayer, which talks about fulfilling the divine purpose to the Jewish people. You want to have them all right next to each other. Okay, so we should be focusing on that. Let's see where we are over here. All right, so nonetheless, we talked about the Ramah says that a person should try to get in all the blessings that they have to say in the morning. So you should say them after davening. Okay, so we learned already in that by Berurah Torah that might be fulfilled already by reciting Ahava Rabbah. Okay, we said so it's entirely possible that you can't make that one up again. And we also said that Elokai Shama you shouldn't say after davening because you're saying Mechayim Mesim in Shemona Esrei. So the Ramah seems to not say that way. So a lot of people ask, well, what is he talking about? Are there some of the blessings? Are there all the blessings? So some people say that you should try to not rely on this Ramah in that case, that you should instead say these blessings beforehand, and if you're stuck and you forgot to, then you should try to have in mind in those proper places to fulfill the obligation for those blessings. So don't just say the blessing and expect to fulfill it. Have in mind to fulfill it. Okay, but in certain ones you can't say after tefillah unless you're going to explicitly have in mind to not fulfill the obligation. So you could do that as well, which is have in mind to not fulfill the obligation of Berurah Torah, and have in mind to not fulfill the obligation of Elokai Neshama. And then you would be able to do those things afterwards. And it's the same thing too with Berurah Torah, that if you started reciting the blessings of Kriya Shema, you should just have in mind to not fulfill the obligation. And so then you wouldn't have a problem with these things fulfilling the obligation, and you'd be allowed to go ahead and recite these blessings afterwards. Nonetheless, as we reiterate, don't come too late, say them in the proper order, and so on. Okay. Okay. So the time period in which one can recite these blessings is actually all day long. So if you didn't say them first thing in the morning, you were rushed, you were trying to catch a plane, you were stuck on the plane, you were something like this, you have all day long to make them up, as long as you had in mind not to fulfill your obligation with them afterwards. And you should try to get them done before you go to bed at night. So that's the main thing, is that they are recited for a person for as long as they're awake all day long. But if you've gone to sleep already, you can't, and you wake up and it's still the daytime, you really shouldn't be saying Ma'avir Shena Meinai, that remove sleep from my eyes. But nonetheless, you should try to keep them still in the morning first half of the day, and still in the morning time, not in the afternoon, even though you technically could recite them all day long. So that would be your biggest b'diavad in that situation. Okay, so let's. We're not going to jump into Nun Gimel today because it's really long and it talks about people who are permitted to lead the congregation in davening. So we'll just talk a little bit more about reciting blessings for during the day to wrap up class for a few more minutes, and then we will jump in next week for learning about who is allowed to jump in after Psuki Zimra to go ahead and lead davening. So one thing that's important to note is that there's no actual requirement to have somebody lead davening for Psuki Zimra. Psuki Zimra can be said without having someone standing there and guiding the congregation. The only thing we mentioned previously was that people should recite their morning blessings for others to hear and to answer Amen. So that is something that can be done either from the front of the shul at the Amud, or it can be done from anywhere else in the shul. Someone can recite for other people. The common custom nowadays in many Ashkenazi shuls is to do that. There are some Hasidic shuls and Sephardic shuls where they'll have a time for davening, but sometimes that time is actually when they're going to recite Yishtabach. So you have to get there 15, 20 minutes early, and they break up the davening in order to account for leaving extra time between people coming in and people going out. Especially if you have 2 or 3 minyanim in the morning in some shuls, especially in busy places like in Israel or in New York City, where a shul has to accommodate a large number of attendees to shul. And there's not necessarily that requirement to have anybody stand and lead the congregation. You're not fulfilling anybody's obligation. with these blessings. But nonetheless, one should still come to shul a little early. So to talk about the earliness and time for it, generally speaking, what my experience has been is that you generally need about 20 minutes to get through the material that we have discussed. You need about 5 minutes to put on your talis and tefillin, and you need about 15 minutes to get through a decent pace on Pesukei Zimra, and also the Berurah Shachar. You can kind of break it up the following way. You have about 5 minutes for talis and tefillin, about 5 minutes for the morning blessings, and about 10 minutes for Pesukei Zimra. You can also increase that a little bit, but that is what I would recommend in terms of breaking up your morning to get those things in with sufficient time. You don't have to necessarily rush. You'll have enough time to think about what you're saying and think about what you're doing, and you'll be able to properly turn your siddur and not feel like you're rushing on other things. However, it does require you to be very much focused on what you're trying to do. You want to make sure that you're familiar with the page numbers and familiar with the siddur. So about 20 minutes or so should be enough time to get you ready to recite all of these things. If you are like me and you actually want to get there and wash your hands and kind of make your place set up a little bit, you want to get there about 25 minutes before that. If your shul starts with Berurah Shachar, then you probably want to get the shul about 10 minutes early, and then assuming that your shul is going to leave you about 15 minutes to recite Berurah Shachar and recite Pesukei Zimra. You'll want to give yourself an extra minute or two to recite the Berurah Shachar, the morning blessings, before someone gets up to lead the tzibur in Berurah Shachar, so that way you can respond Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo and Amen to all of his blessings. And that gives you the zuchus, basically, it gives you some merits in responding and saying just how amazing Hashem's name is and how lauded and praiseworthy it should be by saying Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo in response to these blessings. And that's something that we learned about back early on, like in Siman class. We talked about reciting the blessing for tzitzis for other people and leading the blessings for them, and also back in Siman Mem Vav, which was to basically to advise us that saying Amen to all these blessings is a way to get more Amens throughout the day in order to show our commitment to these mitzvos and their performance and how much meaning they instill in our lives. If you get there a little bit early, you can often find yourself making enough time to also recite the full set of korbanos, the full set of sacrifices. So we didn't discuss it as much in the previous section, but I'll make mention of it now, which is you probably need a little more time to get used to saying the sacrificial section, the sections that refer to taking the Truma Sedition, taking the original last night's dust and dirt off of the altar, and then bringing up the next sacrifice, slaughtering it, burning it, and then bringing the incense after that. So you want to have about a few minutes to go ahead and recite those 4 paragraphs and some of the prayers associated with it until you become more familiar with it. You can recite it in English until you become familiar with the Hebrew, and practice the Hebrew until you can recite it in a fashion whereby it's rather quick, it comes out quickly, you can enunciate it quickly, and it's also being done clearly. So those are the most important things about it. We'll go ahead and hold the shear here for today. Next week, I look forward to talking with everybody about a very interesting and not so applicable topic of who is acceptable to be a leader, a shatz, a shliach tzibor. But for sure, it's something to tide everyone over. I'll just make a quick mention that I'll be uploading lots of sections of the Chai Adam on Hilchos Pesach to the YouTube channel, so look for that in the near future, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the next class on Thursday for Avos Chesed. Have a wonderful rest of your day.